Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nirasya Sarva Sandeham Ekikritya Sudarshanam Prakashita Rahasyam Tam Bhajami Gurumishwaram Shri Govinda Pararavinda Marupananya Vilashojitan Purna Prema Rasotsavo Jalamano Vritti Prasannananan Shajvad Krishna Katha Mahamrita Payo Rasho Mudake Dato Mande Bhagavatani Mananudavam Mudnani Patyakshito Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Nama Jayatam Surato Pangor Mama Mandamater Gati Matsarvasva Parambojo Radha Madana Mohano Kulari Devatamar Madana Mohan Jar Sevak Raghunath Rup Sanatan Jaya Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Echai Goshai Kori Charana Vandan Jaha Hoite Vignanasha Bhishta Puram Krishna Dasa Kaviraja Rasika Bhakta Maj Jai Rachilo Caitanya-caritamrta Gaura Govinda Lila Shunite Galai Shila Tahate Na Hoilo Morachita Jeva Nahi Buji Keva Shunite Seha Kiad Bhuta Caitanya-carit Krishna Upajive Priti Janibera Serariti Shuni le porohoihit Shriyatam nityam Gyatam mura Chintyatam bhaktas Caitanya-caritamrta. So by the grace of Shri Kali Yuga Pavana, the Swabhajana Vibhajana, Prayojanavatar, Prema Purushottam, Karuna Mahasagar, Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and his beloved Parshad nourished by Shri Rup, Shri Sanatan, Shri Raghunath, and Shri Jiva, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraja Gosvami, an exalted songbird in the inexhaustible sky of Gaura Lila. Again today we will discuss Sri Caitanya-caritamrta. We'll resume Madhya Lila, chapter 22, Sanatan Shiksha. The section is running about bhakti being the principle abhideya, or the foremost directive of the Shastra. So why Jnana Marg, why the Karma Marg are not the principle abhideya, and why the Bhakti Marg is, that is what we've been discussing over the recent classes. And we left off in our last discussion with the idea that those who follow the Jnana Marg and exclude any practice of bhakti from their jnana sadhana are not able to achieve jivan mukti and are not able to fully purify the psyche. So to understand that, or to give reference from Shastra as to why that is the case, then we have a citation here from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So today we're going to discuss this verse and some of the commentaries given on it by Jiva Gosvami, Visvanatha Cakravarti. There's quite a lot of commentary on this verse, so it's to discuss Sridhara Swami as well as Sanatana Gosvami and everyone would take quite a long time. So I've gathered from the stack, if you will, the most relevant parts to the theme and the reason for which the citation is given here in the Caritamrta. So we'll look at that. And even at that, it's still a little bit elaborate, but some of the points that we get into, and especially some of the fine analysis that Chakravarti Pad offers, is quite precious, although a little technical, and worth knowing. So that will be our focus for today. So the file should be available, and I'm starting. This is verse 30, Madhya Lila, chapter 22. So this is originally spoken by the Devas when they come to offer their respects to Bhagavan after he has taken his seat in the womb of Devaki prior to his birth. So they say, Yanye Aravindaksha Vimukta Maninas Tvayasta Bhavada Vishuddha Buddhaya Aruya Krichena Param Param Tada Patyantadu Nadrita Yushmarangraya. O lotus-eyed one, others of unpurified, I'm reading off the wrong translation. Whoops, I forgot to take that out of the file. Sorry, there might be an error in there. I'm going off the second translation. O lotus-eyed one, others who consider themselves fully liberated, yet are not of fully purified intellect, because of having forsaken bhava for you, ascend with hardship to the highest position, but fall down from there because of their having disregarded your feet. So all of the phrases in this verse get leveraged to draw out a lot of meaning, so we'll just go straight into the commentaries here, and we'll see the way that it's discussed. So Sridhar Samipad gives a general reading of this verse, which Jiva Gosvami accepts or presents in his Lagu Vaishnav Toshini, but then Yadva, alternately, it can also be read like this, and he comes out with a second interpretation. And the second interpretation is the one he also includes in the Bhakti Sandarbha. And the second interpretation is the one that's specifically relevant to the context that we're in here in the Caitanya-caritamrta. So we're going to go straight into that. So, as follows, first of all, they, that is, those who consider themselves fully liberated, are of not fully purified intellect, avishuddha buddhaya. Why? Because of having forsaken bhava for you, as per the statement in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:14-22, devoid of bhakti to me, dharma endowed with truthfulness and compassion, or knowledge accompanied by austerity, certainly do not fully purify the mind. So I've included some commentary from Jiva Gosvami on this verse later in this discussion. So we'll return to this topic, but this is very significant that he's not just giving some inference for his reasoning here, but he's showing directly from the Bhagavatam itself a statement that without bhakti to me, the mind cannot become fully purified. And he's drawing a parallel between that statement and this one, which is saying that the persons in this verse are of not fully purified intellect. And why? Because they've forsaken bhava for you. So therefore, he takes bhava here to mean bhakti. So because they've given up bhakti, or they give up bhakti, their mind does not become fully purified. So why not? We'll hear about that in a minute. Despite this, they follow the path of Gyan and consider themselves fully liberated, vimukta manina. That is, they conceive of themselves as being beyond the two bodies. So that refers to the gross and the subtle bodies. So as we discussed in the last class, Jivan Mukti, as per the definition on the Jnana Marg, and as per Jiva Goswami's analysis as well, is, quote, non-absorption or non-attachment to both the gross and the subtle body. So they consider themselves to have no attachment to or no entanglement in either the gross or the subtle body. While, of course, they still are embodied, they consider that that's just immaterial. Then, as per the statement in Bhagavad Gita, quote, the hardship during sadhana of those whose minds are attached to the unmanifest, that is, to a non-distinct object of meditation, rather than a form of Sri Bhagavan, is greater. Even after ascending, that is, reaching with hardship, the highest position in the form of Jivan Mukti, they fall down from there. So they have a harder go to get there, and they're not able to stay there. Why not? In expectation of the question when, or when does this happen, which is in this context means the same thing as why then do they reach the state of Jivan Mukti but then have to return? Then it's explained, if is the remainder. That is, they fall down from the state of Jivan Mukti if they disregard your feet. Because of the absence of their having any inhibitor against unintentional disregard of you, as a result of the non-continuance of the influence of bhakti over them, since they have forsaken bhakti. And furthermore, because of the regrowth, even of burned away acts of sin, also as a result of disrespect for the supremely potent lotus feet of Sri Bhagavan. So it's describing that these jnanis, they consider bhakti a means to achieve Jivan Mukti, or in some cases they don't even consider that. We'll get to those two categories in a minute. But they come to the state of Jivan Mukti, and whether they used bhakti as a means to get there or they didn't, in either case, at that stage, they disregard it. So once they no longer consider it necessary to observe the path of bhakti, they don't. And now that they're not, they're quite liable to potentially committing offense, or in some way showing disrespect to Bhagavan. And so as soon as that occurs, then as a result of that offense, then samskaras will come in the mind from past karma, and again they'll leave that state of Jivan Mukti, because again they'll become engrossed, or the mind will become drawn by those samskaras into forms of absorption in the gross and subtle body, pursuit of varieties of vishoy, and therefore they won't achieve complete mukti or remain in the state of Jivan Mukti. So to establish this conclusion, Jiva Gosvami gives a few citations, which are as follows. Similarly too, there is a statement in the Bhagavad Parishishta cited in the Vasana Bhashya. Quote, even Jivan Muktas again enter bondage by means of karma if they are offenders of Bhagavan, who is possessed of immense inconceivable potency. Thus, therein also it is said, sometimes Jivan Muktas acquire an inclination for samsara. Yogis devoted to Bhagavan, however, are not tainted by karma. Similarly, there is a statement from another Puran cited in the Vishnu Bhakti Chandrodaya in relation to Ratha Yatra. Quote, one who out of delusion does not follow the Lord of the universe traveling on his chariot shall become a Brahma Rakshasa, even if one's karma has been burnt away by the fire of Gyan. So if a Gyani, considering themselves a Jivan Mukta, decides, I don't need to observe the path of bhakti anymore, then they might, not show respect to a deity moving along in a Rath Yatra procession that happens to come by their way. They may not show respect while walking down the street and passing before a deity, or show certain respect to those following the path of bhakti. In any way, they may, due to their philosophical outlook, consider it no longer incumbent upon them to observe the norms of those following the path of bhakti, and as a result they'll be held accountable for disrespect or offense in doing so. And that will then jeopardize this possibility of them remaining in the state of Jivan Mukti, even though, as we'll see in a minute, they may not actually have ever been there in the first place, but it'll definitely at least bring about a state of mind where they'll realize that they're not there anyway, because they'll find that they are immersed in their gross and subtle body and not feeling a state of purity, tranquility, and detachment. So, Jiva Gosvami also gives this explanation in the Bhakti Sandarbha, and there, in addition to what's in the Vaishnava Toshani, he adds the following. Similarly also, it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 3.9.4, quote, obeisance unto him, Bhagavan, who is disrespected by those adherent to falsity, whose destiny is Naraka. So this is a strong remark. Or in other words, those who take to a false understanding of Bhagavan, or a false understanding of the nature of existence, end up committing disrespect to Bhagavan, and therefore end up following a path which leads towards degradation. Therefore, it is instructed by Bhagavan Sri Krishna to Uddhava in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.19.5, quote, "Therefore, O Uddhava, knowing your own self by means of knowledge, and thus being endowed with knowledge, and higher knowledge, so knowledge of the Jiva and knowledge of Brahman, worship me out of bhakti. Thus indeed, consequently, it comes as the conclusion that bhakti to Hari is compulsory for everyone." So Jiva Gosvami here is saying that Vigyan refers to knowledge of Brahman, and this comes within the context of an instruction from Bhagavan himself to perform worship of himself with bhakti. So in other words, the idea that you can follow bhakti until you get Brahma Gyan, and then bhakti is redundant and you can discard it, this statement of the Bhagavatam is contrary to that, because we have an instruction of Krishna saying that you have Brahma Gyan and still you're being instructed to worship me with bhakti. So, from this analysis, we get two important points. The first essential point made in these comments, with reference to Srimad Bhagavatam 11.14.22, is that bhakti is compulsory for everyone, because in the absence of bhakti, the mind does not become fully purified. Sri Jivapada elaborates on this in his commentary on that verse. Quote, "Dharma, as referred to in this verse, is desireless. That is, it refers to nishkam karma. Knowledge, vidya, refers to shastric knowledge of Brahman. With austerity means with one-pointedness of mind in the form of sight of that is, of Brahman. So you may have followed the path of karma, doing nishkam karma, that may have led you to a sufficient degree of purification of the psyche such that you can acquire knowledge of Brahman. Then you may have done sadhana, you may have done tapasya to the point that you're now of one-pointed mind upon Brahman. Good for you. However, devoid of bhakti to me, the characteristic of which is desire for priti for me, that is, the desire of which is my satisfaction, neither dharma nor gyan fully purify the mind. That is, they do not purge the mind of all inclinations, beginning with the inclination for the aforementioned post of Brahma, and culminating in the inclination for non-rebirth, or moksha. So, unless you take to the path of bhakti, you have some kind of vasana going on. It might be a vasana for some form of what's called bhukti, or enjoyment, be it in a higher loka or be it in this one, or it might be a vasana for mukti. But in any case, you've got some vasana that's clouding or impelling the functioning of your psyche in either case. So the mind is not fully purified or not fully freed from these untoward vasanas unless one takes to the path of bhakti, whereby what happens? Whereby the only vasana that you have is for the pleasure of Bhagavan and not yourself. So the only way to make the mind fully free from any self-directed vasana is the path of bhakti. The path of gyan, the path of karma won't do. This is essentially what's being conveyed here. This is to say that without bhakti, the mind inevitably remains contaminated for varieties of worldly enjoyment in accord with one's past samskaras, or at least by desire for moksha. The second essential point is that in the absence of bhakti, there is every likelihood that one may commit offense to Sri Bhagavan. And if one does so, then vasanas for varieties of worldly enjoyment will crop up again in the mind and keep it in a contaminated state wherein it is not possible to attain moksha. So, here we have two fundamental reasons for this statement, that the minds of such jnanis are not fully purified, and therefore they're not able to actually achieve or sustain the state of Jivan Mukti. So now we'll turn to Chakravartipad's commentary, because he brings another line of thought or another further consideration to this analysis, which makes the point here in the Caritamrta even more robust. So he comments as follows: the ocean of material existence, which becomes the size of a cowhoof print only for Vaishnavas, is indeed fearsome and extremely difficult to traverse for those jnanis who perceive Maya within your form constituted of completely pure existence, or Vishuddha Sattva, as is stated by Sanat Kumar in Srimad Bhagavatam. Quote, there is severe hardship here for those desirous of somberly crossing the ocean of material existence, filled with the crocodiles of the six senses, who do not have the boat, namely Isha, Bhagavan. Therefore, making the worshipable feet of Bhagavan Hari your boat, you should cross over the plight of this difficult to traverse ocean. So he gives a stack of citations here, so I'll just keep reading them. He says, and as also stated by Bhagavan in Bhagavad Gita, quote, the hardship during sadhana of those whose minds are attached to the unmanifest is greater. And as stated by Narada in a verse we discussed in a recent class, even untainting Gyan, illuminative of Brahman when devoid of bhava for achyuta, does not shine greatly. And as per the tikas we read in that verse, quote, does not shine greatly means does not lead to the attainment of moksha. In the very same way, the devas too say yea, that is, they speak this verse. Others refers to those other than the sat of the aforestated characteristics mentioned in the previous verse who are favored by you, namely Bhagavan. As per the address of Sri Bhagavan in this verse, O lotus-eyed one, they, that is, the others spoken of in the verse under discussion, are those who do not experience the sweetness of a glance of your grace. Since no one can attain liberation from Bhagavan's Maya without the grace of Bhagavan, Maya's master. This is the purport. So this is clever. In other words, it's not quite sarcasm, but if their point is to say that the people who disregard Bhagavan don't get his mercy, then they say, oh, lotus-eyed one, or oh, he whose glance is so attractive, implying, or sort of speaking as though they're in the know, like these poor unfortunate people that are not even interested in receiving the glance of your grace. Oh, you of such beautiful lotus eyes. So there's a Vyanjana there, if you will, that Chakravarti Pad is drawing out. The idea being that it's only the grace of Bhagavan, which is often represented in literature as his glance, that enables one to cross samsara. So they speak adoringly of the source of that glance, to hint at that. Okay, regarding, quote, they who consider themselves fully liberated, as your bhaktas consider themselves samsaris, even though they have crossed beyond samsara, so exactly they consider themselves fully liberated, even though they are fallen inside samsara. So here's some irony for you. The bhaktas are thinking they're not free, and they're actually free. And these, persons neglecting the path of bhakti are thinking they're free, but they're actually entangled. The cause in this regard is stated as follows. Because of having forsaken bhava for you, who are possessed of lotus eyes and a sweet figure, meaning because of an absence of priti for you, as a result of contemplation on your being an amalgamation of Maya. So, according to the viewpoint of the Jnanis, the form of Bhagavan is saguna. The form of Bhagavan is part of the realm of Maya. It's not transcendent to Maya. So because of their contemplation or consideration of Bhagavan being saguna, or loosely speaking mundane, they don't foster any sense of priti for him, or any desire or sense of ultimate meaning in the idea of having priti or bhakti for him. So although he has lotus eyes, although he has such a charming figure, still they don't foster a sense of love for him because they think that charm and that beauty is a feature of Maya. and not something transcendent of Maya. As a result of the folly described in the statement of Sri Bhagavan in Bhagavad Gita, quote, "Fools deride me as having donned a Mayic human form, they are of unpurified knowledge," meaning, although their knowledge has produced by virtue of their being of purified psyche, although their knowledge has been produced by virtue of their being of purified psyche, something is missing here, caused by their conquest over kama and so forth, it is not, produced should be purified. Although their knowledge has been purified by virtue of being of purified psyche, caused by conquest over kama and so forth, it is not fully purified, because they do not understand that the essential nature of Bhagavan and bhakti to him is not of the nature of Maya. So this is where the phrase avishuddha buddhaya, you've got two prefixes on here. The word shuddha means purified. Vishuddha would mean highly purified or fully purified. And avishuddha would mean not fully or not highly purified. So here Chakravarti Pad is laying out the significance of why both of these prefixes are there on the word shuddha. So he's acknowledging there is some shuddhi, there is some purification that's gone on. They have done some sadhana, they have purified themselves of a significant degree of worldly interest and attachment. But they haven't fully purified themselves or fully purified the intellect, because they still have the misconception or they still have the impure idea that Bhagavan is merely a part of Maya. So their intellect or their understanding is not fully purified, even though it's been purified to a significant extent. However, that bit that's not is a very problematic bit to retain. Why? We'll find out here in a minute. Despite that, they ascend with hardship, that is, by means of realization produced by the hardship of austerity, control of the mind, control of the senses, and so forth, to, quote, the highest position, that is, to the state of a Jivan Mukta. Their being endowed with ancillary bhakti is to be understood because of the impossibility of their ascending to that highest position without that. So here's where Chakravarti Pad starts to bring in some fine thought. And he's saying, if what the Bhagavatam is saying is to be taken at face value, that they are actually in the state of Jivan Mukti, then from our perspective, they couldn't have got there if they hadn't done some bhakti along the way. So even though they're considered jnanis, we have to infer that inside their jnana, there's some ancillary bit of bhakti, because if it weren't there, they would have never reached that state in the first place. Why? So he refers to the same verse that we discussed in the previous class from the 10th canto. Quote, "O Lord, for those who abandon bhakti to you, that from which there is a flow of auspiciousness, and struggle to attain awareness of oneness, only this hardship remains and nothing else, as in the case of those who thresh thick chaff." So, because that verse says you couldn't have ever gotten to the point of Jivan Mukti without bhakti, we have to infer that these jnanis do have some kind of bhakti. So he's calling it ancillary or gunibhuta, some secondary supportive element, what is some elsewhere called bhakti mishra gyan, or that they're following a path of gyan, but there's some bhakti secondarily mixed into it to support it, though a little bit like the way they put preservatives or emulsifiers or things like that in food. It's not the main bit, but it holds it together. It keeps it functional, or keeps it from spoiling, something like that. So it says they fall down from there, that is, from the state of being a Jivan Mukti, a Mukta, because of jnanas being a mirage of water without that. That is, because jnana is like a mirage if it is not supported by actual bhakti, meaning bhakti that is primary rather than merely ancillary. So if they retain this ancillary element to get to the state of Jivan Mukti, and then they drop the ancillary element thinking, okay, now I'm a Jivan Mukta, then that state of Jivan Mukti that they got with the support of that ancillary bhakti disappears like the water in a mirage, and they don't remain there because it's actually the bhakti that was sustaining or enabling the psyche to remain in that state. Now, Chakravarti Pad anticipates your next question and says, well, why do they fall down even in the presence of such ancillary bhakti? So if they have this bhakti, then why did they fall down? Or why did they drop the bhakti? What's going on here? So to this they say, they by whom your feet are disregarded as a result of thought of your feet being mayak. Anadrita yushmarangraya. So he's coming now to the final section of the verse, where it's saying that they are they by whom your feet are disregarded. And so he's contextualizing this and saying, what is the disregard that they show? The disregard that they show is their philosophical viewpoint, that they conceive of this. Oh no. What happened to the network?
Recording in progress.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. Hopefully the line will hold. Today the internet has been good. I've had no issues, so I don't think it'll be a problem like last time. At least I hope not. Anyway, I'll keep going here. So, he's saying that the disregard that they showed to Bhagavan is not just that they didn't stand up while the deity was going by on a Rath Yatra. The disregard that they show to Bhagavan is in their philosophical view that they adhere to day in and day out in their life, that they conceive of him to be mayak when he's actually not. So, let's look further at this. The meaning is this. The bhakti existent as a limb of Jnani's Gyan is of two types. That being practiced minimally, solely because of the injunction in Shastra, quote, Gyan shall not be accomplished without bhakti, and possessed of disrespect as a result of thought of Maya or thought of the Mayak in relation to the worshipable figure and so forth of Bhagavan, which are meditated upon by such Jnanis. So if they're practicing bhakti just because they're told that they have to, and they're practicing it with the idea that Bhagavan is actually a part of Maya, then that bhakti, although it sounds even like a contradiction, but it's like that bhakti is disrespectful, or that bhakti has in it some disregard for Bhagavan. So the second category would be bhakti that's free from that disrespect. In other words, there can be a group of Jnanis that use bhakti as a means to achieve their objective, but don't foster this idea that Bhagavan is mayak, and don't disrespect Bhagavan along the way, even though they're using bhakti as a secondary element to Gyan. And then there's the Jnanis that do show disrespect to Bhagavan by conceiving him of mayak, while at the same time trying to use the power of bhakti as a means to achieve their objective. Why?
Recording in progress.
Okay. Then, by means of the first type of bhakti, oh, I'm muted. Sorry about that. By means of the first type of bhakti, production of knowledge that dispels ignorance after a long time for those who are possessed of austerity, control of the mind, control of the senses, and so on, production of the state of being one with Brahman, and sudden withdrawal of such bhakti upon reaching the state which the Jnanis that were using such bhakti to reach occur. They who have this first type of bhakti, that is bhakti that is ancillary, are said only to be those who consider themselves fully liberated and are not, rather, actually Jivan Muktas. So this is the category that's in the payar that we're trying to explain here in the Caritamrta. Why does this line keep dropping? This is frustrating.
Recording in progress.
Sorry friends, I don't know why the line is dropping. My my data is not expired for the day, and it's been working fine all day. So I'm sorry about that. I don't have a better explanation. And we're dealing with some quite technical materials. I'm sure it's not pleasant to have the line drop repeatedly while trying to follow this, but I'll try a little more. Hopefully it'll be okay. So the payar under discussion that this whole discussion is being given to explain is that the Gyanis think I've achieved Jivan Mukti when in fact their intellect is not purified. So here we get in full, you could say, technical detail, Chakravarti Pad explaining precisely what type of Gyani fits that exact category and condition. So that, you might say, is sufficient to explain the payar, but because he offers relevant discussion of other groups of Gyanis, which give us a broader range of potential in regard to the topic, I think it's worth seeing his whole discussion of the subject. So, from here we continue, and he says, number 1, because of Bhagavan's statement, I am attainable by means of one-pointed bhakti. Because of the non-attainment of unmediated experience of the referent of Tat, which is a classical way of just mentioning Brahman, without bhakti, and because of the possibility of their committing offense to Bhagavan, they also fall down because of the regrowth even of previously burnt away karmas, as described in a statement from another Purana cited in the Vishnu Bhakti Chandrodaya in relation to Ratha Yatra. So now he cites the exact same 3 verses that Jiva Gosvami cited in the previous commentary. I'm not going to read them again. So he's using the same reference and saying, Bhagavan says I'm attainable only by bhakti. You can achieve even perception of Brahman without the help of bhakti. And if you don't continue to follow bhakti, there's every likelihood that you're going to commit offense to Bhagavan. So for these 3 reasons, someone doesn't actually retain the state or enter the state of being a Jivan Mukta. When they have the first viewpoint, which is the viewpoint that Bhagavan is Mayak. Now, by means of the second type of bhakti, that is, that which is free from disrespect of Bhagavan, or free from the idea that he is merely an aspect of Maya, which remains uninterrupted even after their state of being one with Brahman is produced, and their ignorance and knowledge recede, Jivan Muktas are caused to experience direct perception of the referent of Tat, namely Brahman, and shall verily become siddhas. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 18:54 and 55, situated in Brahman and of clear mind, one neither laments nor hankers. Equal to all beings, one attains supreme bhakti to me. By bhakti, one truly knows me, as far as and as to who I am. Then, having come to know me truly, one enters thereafter. So, this is significant because if you read the payar here in Caritamrta at face value, you might arrive at the conclusion that all Gyanis, regardless of their mentality, never achieve Jivan Mukti. But here, it's being made clear that some do and some don't. And those who don't are those who sustain this philosophical view that Bhagavan is part of Maya, and who by that and other means show disrespect to Bhagavan. But Gyanis who follow the path of bhakti as a supportive feature of their observance of the path of Gyan.
Recording in progress.
Gyanis who do follow the path of bhakti as a supportive feature of their practice of Gyan do achieve Jivan Mukti and can ultimately achieve perception of Brahman. So this is helpful to see what is the intended scope of what was stated there in Caritamrta. So I've got a few other points to add to what's on here. So important to note in this commentary is the explanation of how Jnana is dependent on bhakti to bestow its results, and the additional reason that Sri Chakravarti Pad identifies as to why the intellect of Gyanis does not become fully purified, even when Gyanis engage in an ancillary form of bhakti. In addition to the reasons offered by Sri Jiva, that number one, their minds remain polluted by desire for various worldly objects, or the desire for moksha, and that two, they run the high risk of committing offense to Sri Bhagavan, as a result of which such desires re-emerge in the mind. The additional reason is given here that the mind remains impure if it fosters the conception that Bhagavan is Maya.
Recording in progress.
Meaning that Bhagavan is not transcendental to Maya, but rather a part of Maya. This conception is itself an offense to Bhagavan, and thus also a cause of the re-emergence in the mind of desires for worldly objects or moksha, which upon re-emerging preclude the possibility of anyone attaining moksha. It is also noteworthy that Gyanis who do not foster an attitude of respect and a conception of transcendence in relation to Sri Bhagavan do not receive grace from Bhagavan, and as was indicated in Bhagavad Gita 7.14, as cited earlier in this chapter, without the grace of Bhagavan, it is not possible to cross beyond Bhagavan's Maya. So, Daivesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya, mayamevit tarantate, mayamitam tarantite.
Recording in progress.
Bhagavan said, only those who take shelter in me, only those who worship me, cross beyond Maya. So if these Gyanis are thinking Bhagavan is part of Maya, then will, by worshipping that supposedly Mayic Bhagavan, will they transcend Maya? Here the viewpoint saying no. If one doesn't think that Bhagavan himself is beyond Maya, then how by worshipping him will one cross beyond Maya? This is the view. It is also worthy of note, however, as Sri Chakravarti points out, that it is not that all Gyanis remain of unpurified intellect and fail to attain liberation. Rather, it is specifically those amongst them that disrespect Bhagavan that remain such. And it is this group of Gyanis that was referred to in the previous payar as those who think themselves Jivan Muktas, yet are of unpurified intellect because of a lack of Krishna Bhakti. Man, this line keeps dropping. This is a bummer. I don't understand why.
Recording in progress.
I'm sorry, friends. The line keeps on dropping. It's out of my control. I don't know why. All right. Well, I have one more point I wanted to include in this discussion, which is Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad's commentary on the two verses of Bhagavad Gita that he cited at the end of the last commentary. And there he gets into some more detail about these different types of Gyanis and how it is that they do or do not achieve Jivan Mukti. And this is just not working. This is so frustrating. I don't know why it's not working.
Recording in progress.
So, we're looking now at Chakravarti Pad's commentary on Bhagavad Gita 54 and 55 of chapter 18. So he says, then, furthermore, after the disappearance of adjuncts, one becomes situated in Brahman, meaning one becomes a form of Brahman by virtue of being uncovered consciousness. That is, one becomes a Jivan Mukta. As a result of the disappearance of the contamination of the gunas, one also becomes of clear mind. Then, furthermore, one neither laments for the lost nor hankers for the unattained, as one did in the prior condition, by virtue of one's absence of identification with the body and so forth. This is the purport. Like a child, one is equal to all beings, the auspicious and the inauspicious, by virtue of the absence of external scrutiny. Then, furthermore,
Recording in progress.
Then, furthermore, even after the termination of Gyan, like a fire without fuel, one attains imperishable bhakti to me in the form of hearing about me, praising me, and so forth, which was present inside the practice of Gyan that reached termination. because of the non-disappearance of bhakti even after the disappearance of ignorance and knowledge, on account of bhaktis being distinct from the Maya Shakti by virtue of bhaktis being a function of my Swarup Shakti. Therefore, it is called in the verse supreme, param, meaning distinct, anyam, from, and superior, shreshtam, to gyan, and meaning pure, kevalam, by virtue of being surpassing of desireless action, jnana, and so forth. So this is quite interesting, where it's saying, bhakti param jnanam me, or mad bhakti labate param, that one attains this param bhakti. So he's giving three meanings. It's param in the sense that it's superior to gyan, it's superior to karma. Bhakti is superior to gyan and superior to karma, therefore it's param. Bhakti is distinct from gyan, therefore it's param. He's giving these two interpretations. So then he comes to the verb in the sentence, attains. Regarding the word attains, labate, although it, meaning bhakti, was previously present, that is, in the sadhana of a jnani being described prior to the, quote, attainment of bhakti that is being described in the verse under discussion, with a fraction of itself for the sake of attaining moksha in the midst of gyan, non-attachment and so on, like the inner regulator present in all beings. That is, even though bhakti was subtly present all along in the sadhana of a jnani, in a manner similar to the manner in which the Paramatma is subtly present in all beings, clear realization of it, that is, of bhakti, did not occur. This is the purport. Therefore, the verb one attains is employed rather than saying one produces bhakti. That is, since bhakti was already present in the sadhana of a jnani, though not clearly understood or recognized by the jnani, it is not said that the jnani creates bhakti by means of sadhana, but rather that the jnani, quote, attains bhakti, in the sense that the jnani discovers the everlasting and superior position of bhakti in comparison to jnana. So now he gives a very clever analogy to illustrate this. One attains it, that is bhakti, like a tiny indestructible nugget of gold that was mixed with urd dal, mung dal, and the like, upon it being separated from them after they are broken down. That is, if a tiny nugget of gold is kept hidden in a stalk of yellow dal, it is not noticed. But if the dal is cooked so that it breaks down, then the gold nugget, which does not break down when boiled in water along with dal, remains whole and can be recognized for what it is, namely gold, rather than dal, in the midst of the broken down dal. Similarly, bhakti is present in the sadhana on the path of jnana, but may not be clearly understood or recognized as something distinct from and superior to jnana. But when one reaches the advanced stage on the path of jnana where even the sadhana process is relinquished, then one can clearly recognize how bhakti is actually distinct from and superior to jnana that remains after the jnana sadhana process is allowed to fall away. Then, at that stage, when the jnani relinquishes the jnana sadhana process and, quote, attains bhakti in the aforesaid manner, there is in general a possibility of attainment for the jnani of complete prema bhakti, and not also its, that is, bhakti's secondary effect, sayuja mukti. That is, at that stage, in which the jnani allows the jnana sadhana process to fall away, the jnani can then take to prem bhakti. And if the jnani does so, then the jnani will not attain sayuja mukti, which was previously the aim of the jnani, because sayuja mukti is antithetical to the prema bhakti the jnani then has. Thus it should be explained that there is mention of that bhakti bearing the characteristic of prema by means of the word supreme. That is, thus one attains supreme bhakti to me means there is a possibility in general that a jnani can, at the advanced stage of relinquishing jnana sadhana, attain prema bhakti. The generality of the possibility being that the attainment of the sadhu sangha necessary to realize prema bhakti is is only also required, as is explained ahead. Okay, so I've been reading up through 1854. I know this is breaking repeatedly. I'm very sorry for that. I'm sure it's impossible to follow properly. At least you have the file and you can read along. Essentially, all Cakravarti is saying here is that bhakti is superior and distinct from gyan, and when a gyani gets all the way up to the stage where they can let go of the sadhana that they were following, then if they get the sadhu sangha necessary at that stage, then the bhakti that was subtly present in their process of gyan, they can then perceive to be something distinct and of superior value to the sadhana they were doing, and thereafter continue with such bhakti. So this is dropped so many times that I'm just going to quit. And I think better to do this in a separate reading, because it's impossible to follow. So I think I'll stop at this. This is repeatedly breaking. I don't think it's possible to follow. So we've read up through the commentary on 1854. There's a commentary left on 1855, which gives a nice overview of this whole subject that's been discussed up through here. So I think we'll read that in the next class, and hopefully we'll have a smooth connection to discuss it together. So if anyone has any comment or question at this time, they're welcome to share. Otherwise, I'll conclude for today. And again, I apologize for the poor connectivity. I'm surprised the internet has been perfectly fine all day. All right, then I'll conclude here. I hope the main point was clear, that this is technical subject matter, that the Jnani does not have a fully purified intellect because of the scope for disrespect being shown to Bhagavan, and as a consequence, material samskaras returning into their psyche. So therefore they're not regarded as truly being of purified mind, and therefore of truly being Jivan Muktas. Vaishnavibhyo Namo Nama. Jai Shri Guru, Jai Shri Gaur, Jai Jai Shri Shri Radhe Shyam.